Hey there. Thank you for being here tonight. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it as you're settling in to sleep? It's a quiet joy to hear where these gentle stories travel, and to know that, even in the stillness, we're connected across time zones and distant places. Now, let's slowly slip back into a much darker moment in history. Tonight, we're entering 1600s Europe, a time when fear spread faster than reason, and a single whisper could cost you your life. Imagine waking up in that world, only to discover that someone, perhaps a neighbor, perhaps a stranger, has called you something terrible. A witch didn't matter what you believed, or what you did or didn't do. Once the word was spoken, your fate was already unraveling. But this isn't a story told to frighten you. It's a soft walk through a harsh past, slow, gentle, and designed to help you rest. If this peaceful space brings you a little calm tonight, feel free to like the video or subscribe if you'd like to return for more quiet stories like this. So, take a breath. Let the day slip away, and prepare to step into the world of those who were punished, not for who they were, but for the fears others refused to understand. Let's begin. You wake up in the cold, unyielding damp of a thatched cottage in Wurzburg, a small but bustling town in the heart of the Holy Roman Empire. The year is 1626. The wind scrapes across the village rooftops like a whispered warning, and your joints ache from a life spent kneeling by straw bedsides and cradling the lives of others in your palms. You are Marguerite the midwife, widow, and soon the cues which dot the room around you smells of ashes and lavender. Dried herbs hang from the rafters. Pennyroyal, mugwort, yarrow. These are the tools of your trade, nothing more. Yet lately they feel like contraband. A misplaced sachet or a wrongly brewed tea could be enough to bring suspicion upon your head. In Wurzburg, suspicion spreads faster than illness. The local prince-bishop, Philip Adolf von Arenberg, has taken it upon himself to cleanse the region. Of witches, already over 150 souls have been executed. Some were old women, some were children, most were poor. All were powerless. You know their names. Some were your neighbors, a few were your clients. One was your niece. It started with whispers, always does. A difficult birth here, a motherless infant there. The husbands grieved, the priests frowned. And eventually, someone remembered you were there when it happened. Some even said they saw you muttering prayers in a tongue they didn't recognize. That you had predicted the child would not survive. But that wasn't witchcraft. That was experience. The law cares little for nuance. The Carolina Code, the legal backbone of the Empire, states that witchcraft is punishable by death. Proof. Confession is enough. Torture will see to that. You step outside. The morning fog is thick, and the streets are empty. Even the stray dogs seem to avoid your path. Children used to wave when you passed. Now they look away, clinging to their mother's skirts. You hear them whisper, hex, witch. The town square has changed. Where once stood a fountain, now there's a raised platform of wood. A gallows looms, half finished, beside it. Across the market, smoke curls from chimneys, not of hearths, but of pyres. Yesterday, you saw smoke at dawn and again before dusk. 2 women, gone, burned alive. You remember when this madness began in earnest. The Prince-Bishop's inquisitors arrived with ledgers and lists, asking about minor offences, women who quarrelled too loudly, those who brewed bitter beer, healers whose patients died anyway. The midwives were especially vulnerable. After all, You deal with blood, with life, with death. That line is thin and easily crossed in the eyes of frightened men. At home, you open your ledger. It is full of names, dates, herbs administered, and notes on births, breech positions, hemorrhages, stillborns. It's the kind of record a modern doctor would admire. But here, it can be used as evidence, a record of unnatural knowledge. You pause over one entry, Anna, third child, delivered with fever. Infant did not cry. You remember the mother's scream. You remember the priest looking at you and shaking his head. That was 6 weeks ago. Anna is dead now. Fever, again, they said. Some suspect poison. Someone said you were seen with her that night. You light a candle and whisper a prayer. You are not even sure to whom anymore. God seems so distant. Perhaps he, too, fears what is happening here. That evening, there is a knock at your door. Not a friendly one. 3 men stand there, torches in hand. One of them wears the bishop's colors. The others are guards. They do not greet you. They do not explain. You are told to come with them. You do not argue as they lead you through the dark streets. People peer through shutters and quickly close them. A dog barks once and then is silent. The prison is colder than your home. The cell is stone and the chains are real. The Inquisitor meets you at dawn. His voice is kind, but his eyes are tired. He says he wants to help you, that he believes. You are not beyond saving, but salvation must be earned. He wants names. He wants a confession. He wants to know how long you've served the devil. You remain silent. The questions grow darker. He asks if you've ever made potions, if you've ever spoken with animals, if you dream strange dreams. He asks if you regret your stillborns, if you ever envied the mothers, if you ever felt rage. You do not answer, not yet. He tells you you'll be moved to the torture chamber the next morning, not because he wants to hurt you, but because truth must be found. The law requires it. You are left alone. The cell is silent, save for the sound of dripping water and your own breath. You begin to think of your ledger, of your herbs, of the births you've witnessed, of the lives you've helped bring into the world. You wonder, how did those acts of care become grounds for death? And more chillingly, if you don't confess, will they make you? The chamber beneath Wurzburg's prison is colder than even your cell. The stones sweat. You are barefoot. Your wrists ache from chains. And yet what hurts most is the knowing this will not end in understanding. You are Margaretha, and the world no longer sees you as a woman who helped birth children in silence and blood. Now you are simply the witch. They bring you to the Inquisitor. Again, his name is Friedrich. You remember because his father once sat in your kitchen, cradling his grandson, born with a twisted foot. You had helped the baby breathe when it didn't at first. Friedrich had wept with gratitude. Now his voice is colder. We must begin, he says, almost apologetic. If you confess freely, there will be no need for extremes. You say nothing, not because you are stubborn, but because what they want from you isn't truth, it's their version of it. The torturer is already at his tools: hooks, pins, a rack, ropes, and a piece of parchment where your confession will eventually be written. Even if it must be forged by pain, they begin with questions. Do you serve Satan? No. Did you learn your craft through sorcery? No. Have you cursed the wombs of women? No. But no does not serve them. Each answer delays the inevitable. They pull the ropes tighter. Your arms stretch, screaming silently within their sockets. The pain is not instant. It unfolds, layer by layer, joint by joint, then silence. They untie you. They offer water. Friedrich's voice softens. We don't want you to suffer, but you must tell the truth. You ask what truth they want. They frown, and so it begins again. After 2 days, they stop the questioning. You are not free. You are not even able to stand, but you are left alone in your cell with a piece of bread and a question that gnaws louder than your hunger. What confession would satisfy them enough to stop? You are not the first. You've seen others return from that chamber with broken hands and hollow eyes. Some gave in. Some died before they could. You remember Lisbeth, a washerwoman. She had named 10 others before she was burned. They say the names came after the screws crushed her fingers. She could no longer lift her own child after that. You swore you would not name anyone. But now, in the silence, you wonder, is that oath worth your life? 2 more days pass. They bring you your ledger. You flinch. The Inquisitor opens it gently, as if it were holy. His finger moves down the names. So many births, he says softly. So many deaths. He stops at Anna's name. She died after. You visited her, he says, and her infant never breathed. A coincidence, you nod. It was fever. He tilts his head. Fever, or a spirit summoned. You want to laugh, but there is nothing funny in this place. Only shadows. Friedrich leans closer. I don't want to burn you, he says. But the townspeople, they are afraid. They need someone to blame. You whisper, then let them blame their fear. He sighs. They will, but they will also burn you for it. Later that night, a young guard speaks to you through the bars. He brings water and something more precious. Words. My sister, he says. You delivered her child 5 years ago. You saved them both. You look up. His face is blurred by torchlight and bruises of exhaustion. I know you're no witch. He says. You thank him, but the warmth in your chest quickly turns to ice. Gratitude means nothing here. Even Heath, this guard, this grateful brother, will not stop your trial. He tells you the execution list grows each week. Sometimes it's 20 people, sometimes 50. A child of 9 was burned last month. A priest's maid was flogged until she named others. The bishop says it's necessary, that it purifies the land. You ask, when does the land feel clean? He cannot answer. The trial begins the next morning. You are brought before the court. Wooden benches, priests in black, and the townspeople gather like crows. They read the charges: witchcraft, murder, sorcery, pact with the devil, maleficium, the use of harmful magic. Your name is spoken like an accusation, not an identity. They call witnesses: a mother whose child you could not save, a baker who saw you walking alone at night, a man who claims your eyes glowed once in the moonlight. You know most of them. You once helped them. Now they help condemn you. You are not allowed to speak freely. Your answers are interrupted, twisted, transcribed. They ask if you ever used herbs to alter nature. Yes, you say, to stop bleeding, to ease birth pains. They nod, as if you have confessed. The bishop's clerk writes it down. One priest stands. To speak about your soul, he says you may be spared the flames if you confess, repent, and accept your punishment. You ask what the punishment is. He says, calmly, death, but merciful. You are not allowed to ask what mercy looks like when you are tied to a stake. That night, you write something on the back of your ledger page. A message, a memory. Not for them, for yourself. I held too many lives in my hands. That is what they could not bear. You think of the infants who breathed because of your touch, the mothers who lived because of your tea, the old ways you learned from your mother and hers before her, the ways men never understood. You think of the firewood already, stacked in the square. You are told the execution will be tomorrow. You are allowed a final prayer. But as the cell door shuts and the world grows silent again, a single question haunts the cold stone walls. What part of healing became heresy? The dawn is slow and still, as though the sky itself hesitates. You wake not because you wish to, but because the door opens. The cell is no longer dark. It is flooded with grey morning light, and with it comes the sound of bells, soft and distant. Church bells. Not for celebration, not for a wedding. For death, you are Margaretha, and today you will be burned. The guards speak little. You are given rough clothing, nothing of your own. No shoes, your hair is tied back, not out of kindness, but for ceremony. The crowd must see your face. You must look like a woman, not a monster, so that they can convince themselves you are one. They do not gag you. That is considered mercy. But you are warned not to speak heresy. You will not. You have said all there is to say. As you are led through the cobbled streets of Wurzburg, people gather. Some avert their eyes, some whisper. Others, children especially, point and ask their mothers what a witch looks like. The mothers do not answer. The platform is already prepared. You see the wood, the stake, the cords, and beside it, a priest, not Friedrich, a younger one. His hands tremble as he holds the Bible. He offers you a chance to speak. You take it. Your voice is calm. Not because you are brave, but because you are beyond fear now. I am not a witch, you say. I am a woman who held life in her hands. I buried more than I saved, but I saved many. No one interrupts you. The wind does not even stir. I will die because I know too much about pain, about blood, about birth. That is my crime. The priest bows his head. He cannot look you in the eye. They tie your wrists, gently, almost reverently, as if the ritual must remain holy. Then they light the kindling. The smoke rises before the flame. It is bitter. You close your eyes. What you do not see, what you cannot. See the girl at the edge of the crowd. Her name is Elsa. She is 12. You helped her mother deliver her baby brother last year. You had held Elsa's hand when her mother screamed. Elsa's mother is gone now. Fever. Again. Elsa had hidden behind barrels to watch your trial. She had told no one, and now, in the crowd, she watches you die. She does not cry, but her fists are clenched. She will never forget the smell of burning herbs, the smell of a healer's skin on fire, the silence of the people. Years from now, she will become a healer too. Quietly, secretly, she will whisper your name when no one is listening. She will pass down your remedies, and your ledger, buried beneath the floorboards of your cottage, will one day be found, its pages charred at the corners but intact. By dusk, nothing remains of you but ash and memory. The bishop will report your execution as necessary. The town will breathe easier for a few days, until the next fever, the next stillbirth, the next cry for help from a woman in labor, and then the whispers will begin again. But not all stories end with silence. Your name will be added to no grave, but it will remain in those who knew your hands, who drank your teas, who watched their children take their first breath because of you. They will not speak openly, but they will remember, and long after the fires are gone, and the wood no longer split for burning, one question will still hang in the air, unanswered and unresolved. How many healers had to die before the world remembered they were never witches at all? You wake with numb fingers, the kind of stiffness that comes from too many hours spent bent over fabric, pulling thread through thick wool until your shoulders forget how to rest. The light slipping through the wooden shutters is faint and grey. It must be early. You rise. Slowly, every joint aching with the weight of repetition. You are Brigitta, a seamstress, a spinner, a quiet woman in the town of Rothenburg, nestled in the heart of Franconia. The year is 1610. You have lived alone for 5 winters now, ever since your father died and the landlord reclaimed half the house. You kept the back room, the spinning wheel, and the worn iron scissors he left behind. There is not much else to your name, and yet this small silent life has grown dangerous. It started, as these things always do, with something small, a stitch in a sleeve that unraveled during Mass, a young merchant's wife whose new bodice laced too tightly, a girl who tripped on her too long hem and broke her arm by minor accidents, barely worth mention, but you had sewn those garments. And in Rothenburg, the women who work alone are watched more closely than those who gossip at market stalls or smile at soldiers. This morning, you walk through the narrow lanes of the town, holding a parcel of finished cloth under your arm. The mist clings to the cobblestones, and your boots already thin solder, soaked through before you reach the baker's square. You keep your eyes lowered. It is better not to meet anyone's gaze these days. The town is changing. 3 women have been taken in the last month. One was the apothecary's widow. Another was a girl who sang lullabies to herself. The third was your neighbor old Marta, who lived with a cat and spoke to it aloud. None have returned. You heard the guards say which, though not loudly, just enough. The merchant's wife, Frau Elsbeth, answers her door with a drawn face. I told you not to come today, she snaps. You lower your head. You said Thursday. I've changed my mind. Her husband appears behind her. He does not look at you. She wants no more of your work, he says. It's poorly made. Cursed, perhaps. You flinch. It's wool, not witchcraft. He narrows his eyes. Are you calling my wife a liar? You say nothing. She slams the door. You walk away, back. At your room, you light the small stove and begin to unroll the cloth. It is good work. The thread is tight. The stitches even. You take pride in what little you can. But your hands tremble. Not from fear, from anger. Because you know what is happening. The same pattern you've seen unfold before. Your father had once told you that spinning was a noble trade, that the spindle was a tool of civilization, that women who spun cloth brought warmth to the world. But now, the same threads that dressed infants and swaddled the sick have become suspicious. A needle is no longer a toolet, is a weapon, an enchantment, a threat. Why? Because you work alone, because your curtains are always drawn, because you don't attend Sunday Mass. Every week, because no man walks you home, you begin to remember things you've heard whispered before. She talks to herself when she works. She stitched a cross into the hem of her own apron, but not the proper way. Once, a boy who teased her broke his tooth. Must be a curse. You begin to see how quickly threads become ropes. A week later, the constable comes. He does not knock. He opens the door as if he owns the air inside. You are to come, he says. There are questions. You do not argue. You carry no bag. They will search it anyway. You wear only your cloak, patched at the shoulder, and your hands shake more from cold than fear. They take you to the Guildhall, not the prison. Not yet. There are no bars here, just long benches and a fire that crackles too loudly, the Inquisitor. Here is named Georg. You've seen him before, he preaches on holidays. His voice was warm then. It is not warm now. You were seen speaking to a crow, he says. You blink. It landed on my windowsill, and you fed it. It wouldn't leave, he notes this on a parchment. You live alone. Yes. You work with needles and scissors. Yes. You do not attend Mass. I sew during the sermons. I pray while I work. He frowns, but not where others can see you. He asks more questions about the symbols you stitch into collars, about your dreams, about whether you've ever cursed a garment. You explain that tailoring requires balance. If one side hangs heavy, the body suffers. If a stitch pulls wrong, it warps the fit. You speak not of sorcery, but of symmetry. He does not listen. You are allowed to return home, but now you are watched. Neighbors glance through their shutters when you pass. A child throws a rock at your feet. A young girl spits and whispers, which pute you. Begin to understand what it feels like to unravel. There is no trial yet, no sentence, but it is coming. One night, you return home to find your spinning wheel broken. The wood is splintered. Your needle's gone. A message carved into your door reads, "The devil's wife will burn." You sit on the floor, surrounded by fragments of your only tool, and stare into the dark hearth. You have done nothing. You have harmed no one. You have stitched every seam with care, and yet, what use is precision when the world demands superstition? You haven't touched a needle in 9 days. It's not just that your tools were broken. You could carve a new spindle, find scraps of thread, stitch with bone if you had to. It's something deeper. The stillness of your hands reflects the stillness of the town around you. You are not a seamstress anymore. You are a suspect. The whisper that began as a thread has become a noose. The townspeople no longer greet you. They do not even pretend. When you walk through the market, they step aside, out of respect, but out of revulsion. Your name is Brigitta, but they have stopped using it. You're now her, the stitch witch, the silent one, the thread walker. They say your thread never frays, that your seams do not break, that your spinning wheel moved without you once, that your breath can sour milk. Each lie pulls tighter than the last. You visit the chapel to prove something, maybe to them, maybe to yourself. You kneel in the back where no one sees. The sermon is about sin and temptation, about women who stray from the path of humility. The priest does not look at you, but you feel his words stitching themselves into your skin. After the service, no one speaks to you. No one even acknowledges that you sat among them, even here, among God's people. You are a ghost in a living body. That evening, a knock at your door startles you. No one knocks anymore. You open it cautiously. It's Greta, the butcher's wife. She steps inside without asking. Her eyes scan your tiny home, the half-swept floor, the cold stove, the broken remains of your wheel. "I need a hem mended," she says, setting down a child's cloak. And no one else is brave enough. You say nothing. She lowers her voice. "They think if I leave it here, it'll come back cursed, but I don't care." You nod. Greta pauses. "They're saying you were seen talking to cats, that your mother died screaming, that you know the names of every baby born on the wrong day." You respond flatly, "Because I kept a ledger." She shakes her head. "It doesn't matter. Before she leaves, she places 2 coins on the table, more than the work is worth. Maybe it's pity, maybe it's penance, maybe it's the last kindness you'll receive. 2 days later, you are summoned again, this time not to the Guildhall, to the courthouse. The inquiry is formal now. The bishop has sent new inquisitors. They wear black. Their fingers are inks. They ask for your full name, your father's name, your mother's, your trades, your earnings, whether you've been accused before. Then come the same questions, only sharper. Do you use thread to bind spirits? Have you placed secret knots in clothing? Do you bless your cloth with chants? Have you seen demons? You answer no. You say you sow with prayer and patience. That's all. They show you a piece of fabric, one of your earlier works. There's a cross stitched into the inner lining. They say it's crooked, a sign of mockery, of inversion, of darkness. Don't you explain? It frayed while folding. You corrected it. It wasn't a symbol, it was a stitch. They do not believe you when you're released. You find your door marked again, this time with a crude figure, a stick woman tied to a stake. You erase it with shaking fingers. Inside, the cloak Greta left is still on the table. You pick it up, slowly. The hem is torn at the edge. The stitches are worn. You thread the needle, and for the first time in days, your hands move with purpose. Each stitch is deliberate, even silent. But as you sew, you realize something. This cloak, once repaired, will still carry a weight. Not in the fabric, but in the act of who touched it. Greta might not say where she had it mended, or she might lie, or she might be punished for it in this world. Even kindness becomes dangerous. That night, you cannot sleep. Your thoughts spin faster than your fingers ever did. You wonder about the women who disappeared before you, the ones who were quieter than you, the ones who tried to run. You do not want to run, but you know what happens if you stay. The firewood is already being gathered. You saw the boy stacking it behind the chapel. You know it's not for warmth. You hear your name spoken clearly just before dawn. A guard. This time, no parchment. No questions. You are to be detained. Formally, a trial is scheduled in the small holding cell. You sit on a splintered bench. A nun brings you water. She doesn't speak, but she places a small scrap of wool in your palm. Before she goes, you don't know what it means. Pity, hope. A gesture of quiet solidarity. It doesn't matter. You hold the wool and begin to twist it, out of habit, forming a short, weaving thread between your fingers. Even here, even now, you make something out of nothing, and as the morning sun seeps between the stones, warming almost nothing at all, you ask yourself, what crime is it, really, to mend things in a world so eager to tear them apart? The square is silent in the hour before the crowd comes. The stake is already standing. You are led from your cell in the same cloak you once mended. It seems neat, its hem even. The guards do not rush. They do not need to. You are not resisting. You walk as if you've done this before, though you haven't, not in this life. You are Brigitte. And today the world will call you a witch for the last time. Your trial had been brief. No one defended you. A few women testified. One said she felt a chill after wearing a skirt you had tailored. Another swore her child grew sick the day she walked past your window. The merchant's wife, Elsbeth, said the stitches in her bodice had been cursed. She had fainted during a dinner weeks ago, and that was evidence enough. You had watched all this from a wooden chair, your hands bound, your voice dry from too many swallowed replies. When asked for your confession, you had simply said, "I sew, I mend, I never cursed anyone." They found it insufficient now. As they fasten your hands behind you, you look across the crowd. You see Greta standing at the edge, eyes wet, hands clasped. Her child is beside her, holding the cloak you repaired. You wonder if he knows what they're about to do to the woman who made it warm again. You wonder what he'll remember. The executioner steps back. The priest steps forward. His voice trembles only once as he reads. From his book, he offers you a final blessing. You do not respond, because it isn't forgiveness you want, it is understanding, and you know now you will not receive it. The fire is lit. It starts low, licking at the edges of the straw. The smoke comes first. It stings your eyes, fills your mouth, coats your thoughts. And in those final moments, you don't think of the faces watching. You think of thread, of the way a single strand can hold a tear in cloth, of how something so small can bind together. A wound, a garment, a life. You think of how they feared your needle, your wheel, your quiet hands, not because they were evil, but because they were yours, a woman's tools. In a world where only men are allowed to make meaning, and then the smoke rises higher, and the silence of the crowd deepens, and your name fades into the ash. But stories have ways of continuing years later. A girl named Anna, raised by Greta, will teach herself to stitch using the old techniques. She will find a small scrap of cloth with your initials in the lining. She won't understand its history, not at first, but she will keep it, and she will sew, and she will speak your name. Only once, in a whisper, under candlelight, BRIGITTA. And the thread will pass on, and long after the last flame has flickered out in Rothenburg Square, one quiet question will still remain, weaving its way through history. When did a woman working alone become more feared than a man wielding fire? You wake to silence. No rooster crows, no bells ring, no carts roll across the damp, frost-covered street outside your shuttered window. It's as if the village is holding its breath. You are Katharina, a widow, 51 winters old, alone. Your husband, Matthias, died 9 months ago, a fever that took him before morning. There was nothing to be done. You boiled mint for his throat, cooled his brow, prayed at his bedside. None of it mattered. You live in a small timber house near the edge of Trier, in the western reaches of the Holy Roman Empire. It is 1589, and the witch hunts have arrived like a sickness of the soul. Over 300 people have already been executed across the region. The flames have become routine. Names are whispered, accusations scribbled. You stopped attending church after they burned Anna Kleist, a deaf woman, for muttering incantations. You couldn't bear the sight of the townspeople singing hymns as the smoke billowed behind them now. They look at you the way they looked at her. You rise slowly and light the small fire, the only warmth in your cottage. A kettle hangs empty. You scoop water from the bucket and place it over the flame. The room smells faintly of thyme and ashes. His scent is still in the bedclothes. They say grief has its own odor. You haven't spoken to anyone in days, not since you passed the baker. And she turned her back. You're not sure what began the gossip, but you suspect it started with the crying. You've been heard weeping at night. They say it is not natural to mourn so long, that your sobs echo through the trees, that a woman who cannot move on must be clinging to the dead or summoning them. Once they would have called it sorrow. Now they call it sorcery. You used to be part of this village. You sold eggs, You tended a garden. You sang during harvest festivals. Your voice cracked with age but steady. Now the children avoid your fence. The priest has not visited in months. Today you walk to the well to draw water. The air is sharp, and your breath fogs in front of you. As you pass the square, you see the scaffold still standing. They haven't taken it down since the last burning. A woman named Else. You didn't know her well. You lower your eyes and walk faster. At the well, Marta, the innkeeper's wife, is already drawing a bucket. She glances at you, then looks away. Morning, you offer. She does not answer. As she lifts her bucket, she mutters, just loud enough, should have gone with him, would have been proper. Your hands tighten around the rope, you say nothing. That night, you hear the dogs bark. Then, footsteps outside. You peek through the shutters, just barely. 2 men pass by, one with a torch, the other with a satchel slung over his back. You recognize neither. They're not from the village. Likely inquisitors. You blow out the candle and sit in the dark. In the morning, the priest visits Father Ulrich. He is younger than most and always had a kind voice. He doesn't sit. He stands in your doorway, half inside, half out. They're asking about you, he says, eyes low. You nod. You already knew. There are rumors, he continues, that you kept something of your husband's, that you speak to him still. You blink slowly. I speak to him in my heart. He shifts. That's not what they say. You say nothing. They've found things before. You know, he adds. Hair under pillows, bone charms, pieces of paper with strange writing. I keep a journal. You write. You nod. He frowns. Women who write are rarely trusted. He leaves without blessing the house that afternoon. You pull the journal from beneath the floorboard. It isn't a spell book. It's barely legible, just lines about your husband. What you remember, what you miss, what you fear. But you know, if they find it, it won't matter what's written. They will read their own meaning into your grief. The next day, they arrive. 3 men. One with a warrant, one with rope, one with no expression at all. They search your home. They lift your mattress, tap on walls, pull your books from the shelf. They find the journal. They don't read it. They just nod to each other. You are told to come with them. You are not told why. As they walk you through the village, shutters close. Doors do not open. Not even Marta at the well will look at you now. They say nothing, but you know what they think. That night, in your cold cell beneath the magistrate's hall, you sit on straw and wonder, when did mourning become a mark of guilt? How did sorrow become a sin? You close your eyes and remember his hands, his laugh, the way he used to fold his sleeves before tending the goats. You whisper his name, not to summon him, not to curse anyone, only to remember that he was real, and to remind yourself that you were. 2. The cell is cold. Stone beneath, stone behind, and straw that smells of rot and mildew. You haven't eaten since they brought you here, not because they didn't offer, but because you can't. The fear has dried your mouth, hollowed your stomach, made your breath short and shallow. You are Katharina, widow, 51, of no profession and no surviving family. That, they say, is precisely the problem. You sit with your hands folded across your lap, the same way you did at the altar when you married Matthias. Your fingers no longer tremble. They've gone still, like the rest of you. Not from surrender. The inquisitors have not questioned you yet, but they will. You hear footsteps in the corridor outside. They pause, keys turn. The door creaks open. It's the scribe, followed by Father Ulrich. He looks more tired than before. Behind them is the magistrate, Klaus Linden, a man who has sentenced 11 women in the last 4 months. He has ink on his cuffs and ash in his voice. He does not sit. "We'll begin," he says, unrolling a piece of parchment. "These proceedings are formal. Confession is not mandatory, but your honesty will reflect upon your soul." He says soul like it's already half missing. The questions start softly. "When did you last see your husband?" You answer, "The night he died." "What did you do after he passed?" "You buried him." "You remember your hands in the frozen earth." "Did you keep anything of his?" "Yes, his shawl, his wooden comb, his letters." "Did you speak to him after his death?" You hesitate. "I speak aloud when I'm alone, sometimes to him, not because I believe he hears me, but because no one else does." They pause. Father Ulrich writes something down. "Have you ever asked him to return to you?" "No." "Have you seen signs that he has returned?" "No." "You write in a book. I record memories. You keep it hidden. I keep it private." The magistrate narrows his eyes. "Is it written in Latin?" "No. I never learned." "Then what language?" "Low German, the way we speak." He exchanges a glance with the scribe. "Have you ever harmed anyone in this village?" "No." "Has anyone in this village harmed you?" You pause. That, of course, is not the question they care about. They move on to objects. A piece of bone found in your garden, a broken mirror near your door, a dried bundle of herbs tied with black string beneath your bed. You try to explain. The bone was from a chicken, dug up by your dog months ago. The mirror had cracked during a storm. The herb bundle was rosemary used to ward off illness. None of that matters. The scribe writes steadily. The magistrate speaks slowly. "Do you know what the law says about witches?" You nod. "They carry grief too long. They live alone. They speak to the dead. They read. They write. They twist the world to suit their pain." You stare at him. "What else should I do with my pain?" He says nothing. They leave you alone again. You lie on your side, curled into the crook of your elbow. The straw itches. Your throat burns. The journal is gone, now taken with them. You know what they'll see. Passages about missing Matthias. Notes about the meals you used to cook, the way he used to hum when working with rope. They'll say it's a coded grimoire. That grief is just a veil for darkness in the next days. The whispers reach even the jailers. One tells you quietly that 3 villagers swore they heard you singing during the eclipse 2 weeks ago. Another says Marta saw you feeding a black bird with a limp. Someone else claims your chimney smoked, even when no fire was lit. They are building a case, out of ashdot, out of breath, out of nothing. Your formal trial is scheduled for the following Sunday. The priest brings you bread and tells you to repent. You ask what for. He doesn't answer. He only says, "There is mercy in confession." You whisper, "There is dignity in silence." He sighs. "You're not the first widow we've seen." You nod. "I know." That night, you sleep for the first time in days. Your dreams are strange. You are in your garden, barefoot. The rosemary is blooming, even in winter. Matthias is there. He's not speaking. He simply holds out his hand and looks sad. Not for himself, for you. You wake with tears on your cheeks, but no sobs. Something inside has quieted, and yet, as the sun rises, and you hear the scrape of the key turning again, the dread remains. You will go to trial. They will ask you questions that aren't truly questions. They will expect you to fold into their story, to name others, to weep, to beg, to die. And as you sit up, spine stiff, feet cold on the stone, one thought beats louder than fear. Why is a woman's suffering more believable when it looks like evil than when it simply looks like grief? The trial takes place in the square. They call it a public inquiry. But there is no inquiry here, only the reading of a verdict already written. The wooden platform smells of damp wood and burned oil. You stand on it with your wrists bound. In front of you, the rope fraying from years of use. You've seen this stage before, from the edge of the crowd. Now you stand at its center. You are Katharina. And the people do not see you anymore. They see the widow, the silent one, the woman who mourned too long. The magistrate reads the charges: unnatural communion with the dead, possession of ritual objects, failure to integrate into the church community, sympathy for suspected witches, persistence in grief beyond the acceptable period. Each word falls like rain, cold, repetitive, and impersonal. You say nothing. There is no need. Every defense would only sound like defiance. They ask if you wish to confess. You do not. They ask if you wish to name others. You do not. They say this is pride, that it is the devil holding your tongue. But you know better, it is sorrow. And sorrow, unlike malice, does not speak to satisfy strangers. The priest steps forward to offer you final rites. You kneel, but when he says, "Repent, and you may save your soul," you lift your head and whisper, "I never lost it." He does not reply. They bind you to the post. Carefully, they say it's a matter of respect, not cruelty. Your knees touch the kindling. It's wet from morning fog, and the smoke will be thick. They soak it in oil. Someone in the crowd weeps quietly. You think it's Greta, the midwife, or maybe the girl who once helped carry rosemary from your garden. But no one moves, not even when the torch is touched to the edge of the pile. The smoke comes first. It always does. It curls up around your hands, your face, your hair. It stings, not just the lungs, but the memory. It smells of bitter herbs and burnt iron. It smells like endings. And as the flames rise, slow but sure, your thoughts do not go to heaven or hell. They go to the morning sun on the garden wall. The ache in Matthias's laugh when he had a cold. The way he used to carve little animals out of spare wood and hide them for you to find you. Remember each of them, not because they matter to the court, but because they matter to you. They matter to you. The fire takes the people, murmur prayers. Some turn away, but others too many watch in silence, as though this was simply another Sunday spectacle, the same as a harvest, or a baptism, or a wedding. Only this ceremony ends in ash. Weeks later, your name will be struck from the church roll. They will say the devil took you, but something else will remain. A child who once saw you weep in the woods will keep a sprig of rosemary from your fence. A girl who learned to write by watching you copy names into your journal will begin her own. A priest, Father Ulrich, will leave the town within the year, having seen too much grief mistaken for guilt. And in time, someone will ask, who was she, this widow they burned? And someone will answer, she was sad, she was alone. And that was enough. The fire will go out. The square will be swept. The silence will return. But in that silence, one question will linger longer than the scent of smoke. How many women were punished not for what they did, but for simply surviving what others could not? You wake before the sun, not because someone rouses you, not because there's a bell or a rooster, but because that's what you've done every morning for the past 4 years. You are Anna, a shepherd's daughter. Or you were, until your father disappeared in the blizzard of '92 and never came back. Since then, you've watched the sheep. Yourself over 40 of them and lived alone in a hut 3 miles from Bamberg's main square. You are 17 now, tall for your age, quiet, often barefoot, and lately, people have started to say your name with hesitation. Not disrespect, not quite, but something else, something more dangerous. They call you sensitive. They say you dream too much. It started with the storms. One evening, after a sudden freeze, took 2 lambs from your flock. You said it would hail again before the week was out. You didn't know how you knew. You'd simply dreamed it. Sheets of white pounding the trees, the shepherd's trail flooding, and the roof of your hut leaking into your bowl of barley. When it came true, no one thanked you. They asked how you'd known. You shrugged. That was mistake number 1. You hadn't meant to be different. You never asked for these dreams, the ones that made your body go cold, your teeth ache, your skin feel as though it had touched another time. They came without warning, like fog rolling off the river. At first, they were only about weather. Then they became about people. You dreamed Marta would fall and break her hip. She did. You dreamed the candle in Father Ruprecht's study would catch the curtain. It did. You dreamed of a woman in a green dress choking on flour. No one believed you until the miller's wife was found lifeless, her apron stained with bread dough. You kept to yourself after that. It was safer. But silence only feeds suspicion in a place like Bamberg. And when the inquisitors came under the authority of Prince Bishop von Dornheim, they did not just look for spells. They looked for signs, for omens, for Odiness. And Anna, with your sheep, your dreams, and your quiet way of speaking, you were as odd as they come. Yesterday they came to your hut, 3 men, black coats, gloves, riding boots that left no mud behind. They asked questions you couldn't answer, cleanly. Where do you go at night? Do you speak to animals? How often do you dream? You said you dream every few weeks. They said, that's not natural. Today, you walk into town. You bring wool to market, like always. It's coarse, but strong, and the older women know you spin it with care. But the difference is in their eyes now. They don't smile. They nod politely and move away. A child stares at you. His mother pulls him close. Even the priest, Father Ruprecht, walks past without his usual blessing. By the fountain, an old man from the guild whispers to a magistrate. He points to you. You keep walking. You no longer dream just at night. Now the visions come during the day, like sudden flickers in your mind. A drop of blood on a doorstep. A woman's scream echoing through the orchard. The sheep scattering in every direction. You try to ignore them. You look down. You work harder, but they don't stop. At dusk, you return to your hut inside. A parchment is pinned to your door. A summons. You are to appear at the cathedral for questioning. The ink is not fresh. Someone must have delivered it while you were in town. You sit on the floor, back against the wood, and press your forehead to your knees. You are not afraid. You are tired, so deeply tired of being something the village cannot explain. And as the wind picks up outside, tugging at the corners of your roof, you wonder, when did a dream stop being a gift from God and start becoming a crime? The hall smells of wax and wet stone. You sit alone on the bench as the inquisitors file in, black-robed, pale-faced. carrying books and scrolls, and a kind of heavy silence that presses against the walls. It's not the cathedral, this is smaller, colder, a chamber below the bishop's residence. There are no stained glass windows here, no light from heaven, only torch smoke and the sound of ink scratching parchment. You are Anna, shepherdess, or dreamer, or liar, as some will soon call you. You clasp your hands to stop them from trembling. The youngest inquisitor, a man with fair hair and ink on his cuff, begins with a question so soft you almost miss it. When did the dreams begin? You answer honestly. When my father died. He nods, but not kindly. And what did you dream of? You hesitate. Rain, storms, fire, people being hurt. He looks up, and they happened. You nod. That's the wrong answer. The next question is less soft. Have you ever called upon spirits to bring these visions? No. Have you ever seen shapes in your sleep? Animals speaking? Black figures at your window? No. Do your sheep behave strangely around you? They follow me. I feed them. They do not scatter. You blink only during storms, which you predict, he says, arching an eyebrow. You feel the net tightening. Each thread is delicate, but together they are strong. They call in Marta, the midwife. She testifies that you once warned her to stay off the hill path, that she listened, that a tree fell there later that day. She knew, Marta says, not maliciously, but not protectively either. She saw it before it happened. They murmur, someone writes. They call in Otto, the baker's boy. He says you touched his arm once and he dreamed of wolves for a week. His mother believes you cursed him. He still flinches when you walk by. They call in the priest, Father Ruprecht. He clears his throat and says, Anna is odd, but not wicked. That is the closest thing you'll hear to kindness. It's not enough. You try to explain, you don't. Summon anything. The dreams come without asking, like wind, like breath. You can't control them. You admit you have no control over your powers. The Inquisitor asks. You pause. No power, you say softly. Only awareness. That word awareness lingers in the air like a curse. They bring out the book, leather-bound, iron-clasped, with pages stained by candle, soot, and time, the Malleus Maleficarum, the hammer of witches that they read from it. A passage about women who dream of fire, of beasts, of misfortune. The devil, it says, finds soft soil in young minds. He whispers at night and plants seeds through sleep. They ask if you hear voices in your dreams. You say, only warnings, only fear. They twist the answer. They ask if you see shapes. You mention shadows. They nod as if that proves it. They ask, if your father speaks to you from the dead. You say no. They ask again. You say no. You are allowed to return home for now. But you are told not to leave the village, not to tend the hills, not to touch any child. You nod, because there is nothing else to do that night. The wind howls over the trees like a wounded animal. You lie awake in the corner of your hut, wrapped in your father's old coat, the fire low, the room still. Then suddenly you feel it again, that strange cold behind your eyes, that shift in air, the way the world seems to stretch, just slightly, like a thread pulled too tight. You see fire not in your dream, in your mind. Clear and slow, the grain mill. You see it burning, and someone screaming, nearby. You weren't sleeping, you weren't sleeping, you. Run to town before the sun rises. You find the guards. You tell them. The mill is in danger. They laugh. The youngest one spits. Tell your devil to fix it himself. You go to the mill anyway. You sit outside the door, watching it, praying you're wrong. You stay there for hours. Nothing happens. Not that day, not the next. And then, on the third night, lightning strikes the mill roof. It burns, just like your dream. The townspeople say, you caused it, that you drew it down, that you sat nearby to watch your curse. Take hold, you don't fight back, because there's no way to explain what it's like to see what's coming, and to be hated for not stopping it, even when you try, especially when you try. And as they come to your door once more, this time with chains, you whisper only one question into the wind outside. If God gave me these visions, why has the world decided they must belong to the devil? They no longer speak to you as a girl. Now you are a witch. They say the word without hesitation, without fear of blasphemy. In their eyes, the accusation is no longer a question. It is a shape you've stepped into, like a garment you didn't sew but were forced to wear. They keep you in a chamber beneath the Bamberg town hall. It smells of old wood, damp stone, and something bitter. They feed you stale bread and thin broth. The guard calls you seer with a mocking grin. You do not answer. You have not spoken since the mill fire. The silence protects you. Or perhaps it's all you have left. You do not dream now. You do not need to. Reality has become more surreal than anything your sleep ever offered. A trial is held. Your confession is read aloud before the town, even though you never spoke. They say you communed with spirits on the hills, that you consorted with a black ram who whispered storms into your ears, that your dreams were crafted in hell and unleashed through your breath, that your visions were spells in disguise. They mention the fire at the mill. They say it was the final proof. You had seen it. Therefore, you caused it. You watch the crowd as they nod, murmuring, some crossing themselves, some holding their children close. No one asks why a young girl would bring destruction on her own people. No one asks what your gain could possibly have been. The truth doesn't need to fit. Only the fear does. They bring you to the square at dawn. The air is wet with fog. The sky is white, as if the world has been erased and is waiting to be rewritten. You are bound at the wrists, but you walk on your own. You pass the sheepfold on the edge of town. A few of the animals look up. You wonder if they remember your scent, the sound of your voice. No one speaks to you. Even Father Ruprecht does not come. Perhaps he thinks silence is mercy. You see the stake before you reach it, wood piled high, oily bundles stuffed between the logs, a scaffold slightly raised, not grand, not ornate, just enough to be seen, enough to teach a lesson written in fire. They read your sentence aloud. You do not hear the words. You look out over the crowd instead. You see a girl you once knew, Greta, the cooper's niece. She looks down at her hands. You see the man who ignored your warning about the hill path. You see Marta, the midwife, clutching her apron, face pale. You see the scribe who wrote down your testimony, even though you spoke no words, and you think of the dreams. All of them, not just the fire. You remember the vision of snow, of wolves, of a red cloth dropped by a river. You remember one dream where the sheep ran in circles and refused to return just before your father disappeared. You remember a dream of a woman being burned, and now, as they tie you to the stake, you wonder, was that woman always meant to be you? The fire is lit. The smoke comes slowly. The damp wood sputters. Sparks leap and vanish. You feel heat brush your feet first. It does not hurt yet. It is like standing too close to an oven. You close your eyes, you see nothing, no dreams, just stillness. They say you did not scream. They say your eyes stayed open until the very end. They say the sheep near. The fields refused to graze for 3 days afterward. That's the part they remember most. The animals going silent, as if they too had lost something they couldn't explain. Years later, your name will be scratched into a book of burnings, one of many. No trial records survive. No defense, just a line. Anna, shepherd's girl, dreamed too much, burned. But on a cold hillside near the forest, children will whisper a different story. That once, a girl could see what was coming, and the price of her vision was fire. They will wonder what she saw in her last dream, and whether anyone had the courage to listen. And a single question, half smothered by time and smoke, will remain. What if her dreams weren't a curse at all but a warning the world refused to hear? You wake to the cries of a woman in labor, not your first, not your last, but something in her voice tells you it will be a difficult one. You rise without complaint, lace your boots with practiced speed, and pull your cloak around your shoulders. The winter air seeps through the cracks in the shutters. Snow has been falling all night in Cologne, soft and steady, blanketing the rooftops and the crooked lanes that twist between the cathedral and the Rhine. You are Clara, midwife, widow, childless, 44 years old. You've delivered over 200 babies in your lifetime, more than any physician in the district, and now they are starting to whisper about you. It wasn't always like this. For years, the women of Cologne trusted you. They brought you herbs to thank you. They sent their daughters to watch and learn. They placed their newborns in your arms before holding them themselves. But lately, since the fever began, they've started to look at you differently. The fever struck fast. Within days, a dozen men were gone. Then the merchant's wife. Then 2 children from the same street. You nursed them, sat by their beds, burned rosemary and vinegar, did everything you could, and when it didn't work, they didn't blame the illness. They blamed you because you were there, because you had touched them, because you were a woman with knowledge. The woman in labor tonight is Marta, the blacksmith's daughter, her first child, barely 17. When you arrive, she's pale and shaking, her mother wringing her hands, the fire in the hearth barely alive. You order water to be boiled. You rub Marta's back. You press your hand to her belly and feel the baby's position wrong too high. The head is tilted. You know this delivery will take hours. You also know she might not survive it if things go badly, so you speak softly. You remind her to breathe. You place a dried clove beneath her tongue to fight the nausea. You whisper prayers, old ones, not from the church, but from your grandmother, who was born in the Black Forest and taught you how to recognize death's shadow before it entered the room. Hours pass. The snow keeps falling. The mother prays, the daughter screams, and finally, after what feels like the breaking of something ancient and invisible, the baby arrives, limp at first, then coughing, then crying. You tie the cord. You clean the child. You wrap him in cloths warmed by the fire. Marta reaches for him with trembling arms. He is alive, so is she, for now. But not everyone rejoices. 3 days later, word spreads that Marta's recovery has been slow, that her fever hasn't broken, that the baby won't nurse. People begin muttering again. The baker says you use charms, that he saw a pouch of nettles in your bag. The butcher's wife claims she heard you humming while boiling milk, a tune her grandmother once said was used in spells. The priest new to town, young and proud, warns the churchgoers about hidden hands interfering with God's design. You know what's coming. That evening, you sit by your hearth, holding the small brass scissors you've used for 20 years. You remember the first baby you delivered, a girl with dark hair and a strong cry. You wonder if she still lives. You wonder if she's now a mother herself. There is a knock at the door. You open it to men, city guards. They ask you to come with them, not to help deliver a child, but to answer questions. You leave your bag behind. You leave your fire burning. You leave your window cracked open, as you always do, to let out the steam from the boiling kettle. As you step into the snow, your fingers begin to shake, not from the cold, but from a question you can no longer keep buried. When did helping women bring life into the world become the same as conjuring death? You are brought to a stone room below the Guildhall. It's dimly lit. The only warmth comes from a single brazier near the far wall, and even that seems to burn reluctantly. You sit on a bench, not tied, not shackled yet, but the rope is visible, looped on a hook just behind the magistrate's chair. They want you to see it. You are Clara, midwife of Cologne. You have held death in your arms more times than you can count. But this is different. This is not death from illness or bleeding or poor timing. This is a ritual, a theater, and the only outcome anyone expects is your fall. The questioning begins. Politely, always, it starts that way. How long have you practiced midwifery? Since I was 19. Who trained you? My grandmother. She was the midwife of Freudenstadt. Did she teach you healing? You nod. She taught me herbs, observation, patience. Did she teach you to pray? She taught me to sing while I worked. She believed songs kept the mother's breath steady. They write that down. Were these songs Latin? No. Were they scripture? No. The scribe raises his brow. The young priest seated near the wall shifts uncomfortably. The magistrate leans forward. You admit you used non-Christian incantations. I sang lullabies. They were not of the church. No, you say they were older. A pause. That word older hangs in the air like smoke. They bring out your pouch, the one from your bag. Inside, dried nettles, sage, artemisia, a pinch of ash, a small carved bone, your grandmother's, shaped like a rabbit. These are your tools, common among midwives, harmless, rooted in centuries of use, but in the eyes of the church, especially now, they are evidence of craft, of conjure, of heresy. The priest speaks next. He's younger than you expected, barely 30. His voice is clear but untested. He asks, do you believe your hands have power? You pause. You've caught infants who weren't breathing and coaxed them into life. You've pressed your palms against the bellies of dying mothers and slowed their bleeding long, enough to save them. You've crushed herbs and whispered comfort, and prayed your own way for mercy. Yes, you say, softly. I believe my hands know how to help. He writes that down. Slowly, they ask about a woman named Sabina dead. 2 winters ago, you remember her. She died in childbirth. Her baby lived. You delivered him yourself, on a floor slick with blood, in the dark, while her husband screamed that you were too slow. I couldn't save her. You say she had been healthy, the magistrate replies. She bled too quickly. You were the only one there. Yes, just as you were with Marta. You close your eyes. They've chosen their story. You are not a woman who saved. hundreds. You are a woman present at 2 deaths. That's all they need. They press you to confess, not with iron, not yet with suggestion, with mercy, if you admit to dabbling in forbidden practices. The priest says, your soul might still be spared. I did nothing forbidden, you reply. You admit to using charms. Herbs are not charms. You sang in tongues. They were lullabies. They were lullabies. You do not deny you touched women while they labored. They were dying. What else was I meant to do? Silence. The magistrate leans back. You admit to practices passed down outside the church. You admit to knowledge from an unbaptized woman. You admit to herbs, to bone charms, to ritual songs, and to unexplained skill in matters of birth and death. You breathe deeply. Your hands are in your lap. I admit to care, you whisper. The verdict is delayed. 3 days, they say. For formality, you are sent to the old cloister for holding. There is no fire there. No straw, just stone and winter air and a broken window, through which the snow blows at night. They feed you broth. Someone leaves bread without speaking. On the 2nd night, you hear Marta's baby has died. The town will not see it as a tragedy. They will see it as confirmation. They will say he was touched. You curl into yourself and press your hands to your chest. They're cold, dry, rough from decades of service. You once believed hands could save anything, but no hand, not even yours, can hold back a lie once it becomes belief. And as frost creeps over the stone wall beside you, you wonder what is more dangerous in this world. A woman who knows how to heal her, a world that fears her for it. They dress you in grey, not black, not red, just undyed wool, scratchy and worn, as if to strip you of colour, of memory, of anything that might make you human. You are Clara, midwife of Cologne, and they no longer call you by name. Now you are the accused, the sorceress, the old witch. Never mind that you delivered their children. Never mind that you eased their wives through hours of agony, that you rubbed their mothers' swollen legs and whispered to frightened girls through their first labor pains. None of that matters now. You are a woman who touched life too often, so they say you dealt in death. The square is crowded. Snow has melted in the streets, but the wind still cuts like iron. You walk barefoot. They claim it is tradition, that the accused must feel the earth as they are returned to it. You know it's meant as humiliation. You feel no shame, only bone-deep weariness at the stake. The priest speaks last, not the young one from your hearing, an older man. He reads from scripture about Eve, about disobedience, about women who grasp for knowledge meant only for God. He says you claimed healing, but wielded pride, that you tried to take the pain meant for others and make it your own, that this is a kind of theft, that no woman should have that kind of power. In her hands, you close your eyes. They tie you gently. You suppose they think that's mercy. The executioner avoids your gaze. The rope is rough, but you barely feel it anymore. The cold has already seeped into your skin. You look at the crowd and try to find a single face that will meet your eyes. There are none, not one. But after the torch is lit, just as the first coils of smoke rise, you hear it. A sound, soft, almost carried away by the wind. A lullaby sung in the old tongue. One voice, then another, then more, women scattered. Throughout the crowd, mothers, daughters, sisters, singing the songs you sang to them, songs you whispered in kitchens, in barns, beside beds soaked with sweat and hope and pain. they sing for you now. Not loud, not defiant, but true. You do not scream. The flames rise, but you do not cry out. You focus on the music, on the warmth of voices against the cold. You let your final breath slip out in rhythm to the lullaby your grandmother once sang over her own fire. And in that moment, as the smoke thickens and the sky darkens behind your eyes, a thought takes shape clearer than anything you've dreamed. They will burn my body, but they cannot burn what I taught them. Years pass, the snow comes and goes, streets change, faces change, but among the women of Cologne, certain things remain. A poultice recipe, passed between neighbors, a whispered chant during labor, a charm hidden in a seam, a hand pressed softly to a pregnant belly, listening not with ears, but with centuries of memory. They won't call it witchcraft anymore, but it will still be yours. It will always be yours. And somewhere, in the hush between midnight bells, the old lullabies still float through the air. And someone always remembers the question, when did saving a life become a crime, and how many were lost because no one dared to stop it? You do not speak, not because you can't, but because the world has given you so few reasons to. You were Elsbeth, 12 years old, orphaned 5 winters ago during the famine that swept through Warsburg like a silent thief. You watched your parents wither one by one, and were found days later by a shepherd who said you hadn't cried once. You live now in the poorhouse beside the stone bridge, in a room filled with girls who don't like the way you stare. You sweep floors, carry pails, peel roots, mend stockings. You sleep near the hearth, closest to the ash dot. No one remembers where you came from exactly, but everyone remembers what you are. Now, Strange, it began with small things. You would stare at people, they said, for too long, as if you saw something beneath their skin. When a baby died suddenly in the market, someone claimed you'd been near her mother that morning, watching her without blinking. When a man broke his leg falling from a ladder, a neighbor swore you'd been standing beneath the scaffold minutes before, silent and still. When the mayor's wife miscarried, the old maid whispered that she'd once seen you bury something small and cloth-wrapped in the garden. None of it was true, but truth was no longer important. What mattered was that you were quiet, and that made them afraid. The poorhouse mistress tried to teach you to speak. She slapped your hands when you didn't answer questions. She made you recite prayers out loud, even when your voice cracked like old wood. She said a silent girl was a suspicious girl. You never asked to be silent. It simply felt easier than saying things no one wanted to hear. One day, a nun came to the poorhouse. She asked for girls who could serve the bishop's estate. You were small and careful. You were chosen. They said it would be better, that you'd eat more, sleep warmer, that the bishop's house had big windows and polished floors, but no one said anything about what they would expect of you or what you would see. The bishop's steward kept his ledgers near the kitchen. You saw him slip coins from the offering box into his sleeves. The cook drank wine meant for the cathedral priests. The chambermaids gossiped with such venom that you often fled to the laundry just to breathe clean air. You kept it all to yourself. You always did, but people noticed you're quiet. And in a house like that, where everyone has something to hide, quiet is more dangerous than anything shouted then. One morning, a candle overturned in the sacristy. The curtain caught. The fire spread fast. It was extinguished before much was lost. But the bishop was furious. He demanded to know how it happened. No one confessed. But someone said you were seen. Nearby, just standing, not running, not calling for help, just watching. They called you in, asked you why you didn't speak, why you didn't scream, why your hands were always cold, why you never looked surprised. You didn't answer. You stared at the tiled floor and thought of your mother's hands, rough from washing, always trembling in the cold. The bishop's steward said your silence was unnatural. The priest said you might be cursed. The cook said she'd always felt off around you. The maid said you once looked at her baby too long. And the bishop, who barely remembered your name, made a sound like clearing his throat and said you should be sent away, not punished. Not yet, but evaluated. They took you to the nuns, the ones near the orchard, where the air always smells of dust and mildew. They gave you a single room, a thin blanket, and questions always. Questions: what do you see when you look at people? Do you hear voices? Do you dream of things before they happen? Why don't you speak? Have you ever wanted someone to die? Have you ever made it happen? You say nothing, because nothing you say will help. You begin to feel the shift, the way there. Footsteps slow outside your door. The way the sisters stop bringing books. The way no one lights the candle in your room anymore. You begin to wonder, is silence safe for war? Have they already decided what it must mean? The air in the convent thickens, not with incense, but with wariness. The sisters stop saying your name. You hear it only in whispers, the girl, the quiet one, the watcher. You sweep the same corridor 3 times each morning. You carry water from the well. You eat alone. You are Elsbeth. You have not spoken in over a year. They say silence is peaceful, but yours is starting to sound like an accusation. The questions continue, now with strangers. A man in a long black coat visits from the bishop's office. He does not sit. He stands with his back to the window, eyes glinting beneath heavy brows. He asks what you know about unnatural restraint. You do not reply. He asks whether you've ever made objects move with your thoughts. You stare at the wall. He asks whether you've heard of the devil's vow of silence. You blink, and he writes that down. They show you things now, tests. They call them. You are placed in a room with a candle. You're told to stare at it. You do. They ask if you hear anything. You do not. They place a cup on a table and leave it overnight. Returning to check for signs, you've tried to enchant the water. You haven't, but they nod anyway, as if they've found what they were looking for. You hear Sister Agnes say, the devil works best in quiet ones. You hear Sister Theda say, no child keeps silent that long without a reason. And the worse, one morning, while you gather linens, you hear Sister Magda whisper, she watched her parents die and said nothing. What else has she watched since? Then, one afternoon, a nun disappears. Gone, just like that, her bed left unmade, her habit still hanging near the fire. They search the orchard, the chapel, the well. They find nothing, and no one says it out loud, but every eye turns to you. You didn't leave your room, of course, you never do unless summoned. But silence doesn't defend you anymore, it condemns. They ask again what you saw. You stare at the bread, crust on your plate. You haven't eaten since morning. The steward from the bishop's hall comes in person now. He says they'll take you to the scriptorium to be examined more thoroughly. You don't know what that means, but the sisters fall silent when it's mentioned, and you notice 3 other girls from the convent have been sent there this year. None have returned. That night, you wake in darkness. The door creaks open. A girl stands there. Marta, the scullery maid. 12. Like you. She has always been kind. She holds out her hand. Come, she whispers. You follow, barefoot. You climb the stairs into the bell tower. She presses a folded cloth into your palm. Inside, a piece of hard cheese and a scrap of wool. It's not much, she says, but you should leave. Before they decide what you are, you look at her, finally truly. Her eyes are afraid, not of you, but for you. And somehow that breaks something. Not loud, just a crack. You whisper. Why? She freezes. You spoke. She gasps. You nod. Why now? You whisper again, because someone listened. She helps you out the back gate, past the woodpile where carts are kept. The snow crunches beneath your feet. You flee, not toward home. You don't have one, but toward the forest where no one asks questions, where silence belongs to the trees, where the stillness is real. The next morning, the nuns find your bed empty. They say nothing, but they make a note in the register. Elsbeth, orphan, vanished, suspected. For years, rumors spread. A quiet girl with sharp eyes, seen near remote villages. A woman who helps injured animals. A stranger who warns mothers about fevers before they come. A ghost in the woods. A witch, a seer, a silence that walks. But those are just stories. A voice lost in snow, or maybe found again. Because, in the end, the real question was never whether you could speak. It was always, what kind of world makes a child choose silence to survive? You live where the roads end, past the millstone path, beyond the bramble fence, where the trees grow old, without names, and snow gathers, even in spring. No one follows you here. No one dares. But that hasn't stopped them from speaking of you. They call you the orphan, the whisperer, the girl with no voice. It's strange how they keep telling your story without knowing anything about you, or how you survived. It took time at first. The forest was cold and brutal. Your hands bled gathering bark. You chewed acorns until your jaw ached. You slept beneath fallen pine limbs, curled like a baby fox. But you learned, you watched, you always had. The silence that once damned you became your greatest tool. You began to understand the language of birds when their calls meant danger, when their silence meant wolves. You recognized which mushrooms drew fever, and which eased it. You learned to trap warmth between moss and stone, how to sleep with one eye open. Then came the first visitor, not someone from Wurzburg, a girl from another village, limping, her ankles swollen, her breath ragged. She had heard the stories of a girl in the trees who did not speak, but knew how to heal. You didn't answer her questions, just wrapped her foot, made a pointed toward the path she should follow when she could walk again. She left behind a piece of bread and a blue ribbon. More came. Always quietly, a mother with a child running hot with fever, a boy with a festering cut, a woman too frightened to say she was pregnant. They came in the dark, left before light. Some whispered prayers, some left coins, some just wept. You said little, sometimes nothing at all, and yet they all seemed to hear what they needed. Years pass, you grow taller, your hands become rougher, but the look in your eyes never changes. It's the same look that frightened the bishop's steward, the same look that made the nuns whisper, the look of someone who sees without speaking, who remembers everything one night. A girl comes alone. She is maybe 8, hair in tangles, eyes wide. You give her food, a blanket, your spot by the fire. The next morning, you find a small satchel tied to a tree. Inside, a rosary, a wooden comb, and a note. It reads, "They said you were a curse. My mother said you were a girl, I think. She was right. You never learn her name. Eventually, they stop calling you girl. Now it's witch, but it's whispered differently. Not with hate, with fear. Yes, but also with need. They still come, the ones who cannot ask, openly, the ones too desperate to care. What you're called, you're nearly 20 now, still silent. Most days, but when you speak, it is only when it matters. To warn, to soothe, to tell a mother her baby will live, or to tell a girl to run. You have become myth and memory, legend and loner, but you are real, and in your quiet, you've built something stronger than any cathedral. Trust. One person at a time, far away. In Wurzburg, your name is still written in the old record books. Elsbeth, orphan, suspected of witchcraft, vanished. But that entry is dust now, ignored, forgotten, and out here. The world knows something else, that there is a silence in the forest, one that listens, one that heals, and if you're lucky or desperate it might listen. To you, to Dot, because in the end, the only thing more frightening than a child who refuses to speak is a world that finally learns what she was trying to say. You were born with cloth in your hands. Not silk or velvet, those were for nobles and priests, but rough flax, damp wool, twisted hemp. Your mother wove in the kitchen, and your grandmother spun by candlelight, long after the men had gone to sleep. You learned to thread a loom before you could write your name. Your name is Margaret. You were 15, from a village just outside Strasbourg, in the region they call Alsace, a land where borders move like water and languages mix like flour and salt, but where some things like the rhythm of the spinning wheel stay. The same. Dot, you are not a witch, you are a weaver, but in the year 1628, those lines are easier to tangle than the threads between your fingers. The trouble began with color. You dyed your wool too well. Your red held longer in the sun than the merchants. Your green stayed vibrant through winter. Even the preacher's wife remarked how your blues didn't fade with washing. Unnatural, someone muttered. A neighbor, perhaps. Someone whose dye vat had gone sour. Then came the illness. A boy from the next village, 7 years old, with yellow eyes and trembling hands, died after 3 days of fever. His mother said she bought yarn from your stall the week before. I'm not saying it was the thread, she whispered, but it smelled strange, sharp. No one asked what else the boy had eaten. No one questioned the water from their well. They questioned you because it's easier to blame a spindle than to face a world where children die and the earth offers no explanation. The village council summoned you, a dozen men in wool coats, each with mud on their boots and suspicion in their eyes. They laid out your cloth samples across a wooden table like evidence. The reds, the greens, the blues. They asked you what herbs you used. You answered, madder root, walnut, husk, WOAD. Common things. Nothing forbidden. But you said too much, and said it too clearly, and that made them lean back in their chairs, because you were not supposed to know. This much you were not supposed to be better than the guild apprentices, or cheaper than the church licensed. Loom master, you were a girl with a gift, and in this world a gift is only safe if it serves a man. They called in Father Lucas. He sniffed the dyed yarn, then sniffed again. This one smells like smoke, he said, of your crimson, you explained. It came from heat fixing the pigment, from a hot iron, not fire. He did not listen. Later that week, your spinning wheel was stolen from your home. 3 days after that, a heap of your cloth was found burned behind the grain shed. Then the letter arrived. A summons. You were to be questioned by the bishop's agents in Strasbourg, not for trade disputes, but for sorcery. Your mother wept. Your grandmother simply nodded. They've done it before, she whispered. They'll do it again. You asked her what to do. She said, keep weaving. So you did. The road to Strasbourg is colder than the mountains. You ride in the back of a cart with no cover, alongside a barrel of dried peas and 2 bundles of firewood. No one speaks to you on the way. The driver doesn't even look at you. When you try to ask where you'll be taken, he shrugs. They didn't tell me. Just to deliver you. Like a parcel, like goods. Not like a girl with a name. Strasbourg is louder than you expected. Street vendors shout in 3 languages. The cathedral bells clang until your bones ache. Children run barefoot over cobblestone paths. But it all fades the moment you see the building that waits for you, stone. Tall and grey, like something that was built to endure silence. The bishop's hall inside. The walls echo, not with voices, but with footsteps, with the creak of doors, with parchment being turned too slowly, and with the weight of suspicion. They sit you on a wooden stool. No fire, no cushion, just the cold floor, and the eyes of men you don't know. They have your cloth, your threads, your dye, jars, your needles, all laid out as if they were tools of war. One man, his robes too clean for real work, picks up a bundle of your indigo yarn. Explain why this holds color longer than the merchants. You answer, I wash it twice. I twist it tighter. He frowns. Where did you learn this? My grandmother. She was not a guild dyer. She learned from her grandmother. So, witchcraft passed from mother to daughter. No, you say, just patience. They don't write that down. Another man picks up your red cloth. This smells burnt. I fixed it over fire. Why? Why? To hold the dye. He shakes his head, and the black threads, crushed walnut shell, iron water, vinegar, and the symbols. You blink. Symbols. He holds up a scrap of embroidery. Just a flower, a 7-petaled rose, common in Alsace. Used to mark good fortune in births. But he says 7 is a dangerous number. This is no coincidence. You try to explain, he talks over you. By midday, they call in Father Lucas. He has traveled ahead of you, submitted his report. He tells the panel, you work alone, that you don't tithe, that you read too well for someone who spins, that you corrected him once, in public, about which herbs cure wool rot, that you are prideful, that you are precise, that your cloth outperforms men 3 times your age. He doesn't need to say the rest. You're a woman whose skill offends. That's always enough. You are sent to the Weaver's Tower, not a cell but not freedom. They say it's temporary, that you'll be observed. You were given a spindle, but no loom, no dyes, just wool, dry and brittle. The thread breaks often. You knot it quietly, over and over. No one speaks to you, but they watch, always watching, as if the work itself will confess, as if a thread wound the wrong way will spell your guilt. At night, you remember your grandmother's voice. Keep weaving, she had said. But now you begin to wonder, how long can you weave before the world decides your thread is too strong to let unravel freely? A week passes, then 2, then 5, you spin. They watch the wool they give you as coarse, hard to work with, nothing like the soft flax you grew up with, nothing like the fine skeins you once dyed for the merchant's wife. Still, your fingers move without thinking. Pull, twist, wind. Repeat, each knot is tighter, each break cleaner. They think they're testing your spirit, but they don't understand that your hands learned patience long before your tongue learned silence. You are Margaret. You do not give them a confession, so they decide to write one for you. They summon you again, this time to a lower chamber. The ceiling is low. The candles smoke. The man who greets you is not from Alsace. His accent is harder. His eyes, dull, he slides parchment toward you. Your name is already written at the top, beneath it. Admission of supernatural craft, textile maleficium. The crimes are listed plainly. Working cloth that resists rot, selling thread that holds unnatural color, weaving symbols of 7 petals without religious oversight, practicing dye making without male supervision or license. Sign, he says. I did nothing wrong, you whisper. That is not required, he replies. You don't sign that night. They take your spindle. Your fingers ache with the absence. The silence of the room no longer feels peaceful. It presses on you, but you do not break. You trace imaginary patterns in the air, the same way your grandmother once did to teach you how cloth takes shape in the mind before it does on the frame. They cannot steal that from you. Not yet. Then something shifts. A girl arrives in your chamber, no older than 10. Hands raw from cold. Knees scraped. She looks afraid. She's wearing a shawl you made 2 winters ago. You recognize the stitching. She's your apprentice, they say. You shake your head. I've never seen her before. She says you taught her the red dye. Didn't. She says you whispered to the thread. She lies. She says you promised her a color that would never fade. You fall silent, not because it's true, but because it could have been. It's the kind of story they want to believe, and this child, perhaps to escape punishment herself, knows that now the priest returns. So, you pass your craft to children. I pass down cloth. You say nothing more. That's not what the child says. She's scared. Then speak now, he says, and explain why so many believe what they believe. And you finally answer, because they have always feared women who make something out of nothing. It's not the answer they want, so they hold a hearing, not a trial. Those are rare for weavers, too lowborn to common dot. This is just a confirmation of guilt for the sake of record. The bishop's seal is placed on your fate. Your mother is not notified. Your grandmother has already passed. Your name is added to a list kept in a back room, on a shelf behind a locked cabinet. A weaver of unexplained skill. No execution, no fire, but no return. Either you are banished, not from the city, but from your trade, from your loom, from the only thing you ever built with your own hands. Years pass. You survive by spinning in secret, by selling thread under other names, by unlearning pride, by teaching quieter, fewer colors, simpler patterns. No 7-petaled flowers, but your cloth still holds, even as your name fades, even as your hands grow brittle, even as people forget what was done to you because you were too good, too fast, too precise, too much. And in the end, it's not your wool that outlasts you. It's the fear of women who weave, not just cloth, but knowledge and power and memory, because they were never afraid of your spindle. They were afraid of what you might tie together that they could never unravel. And now, as the last embers of these forgotten stories flicker into quiet, we leave behind the whispers of spinning wheels, shadowed corridors, and cold stone rooms. Each woman you met tonight lived in a world that feared what it could not explain: intelligence mistaken for sorcery, silence mistaken for guilt, skill mistaken for sin. They were not witches, they were daughters, midwives, orphans, weavers, but history, when afraid, does not always remember kindly. So, as you drift now into rest, carry this thought with you. Sometimes the most dangerous thing a woman could be was simply herself. Good night. Sleep well, and may the past settle softly, like dust across forgotten pages.